Hi, I'm Daniel Andrews, owner and creator of AndrewsFootball.com. I'm bringing you the third greatest Super Bowl team of all time, and I'm kind of doing a Mel Blount impression to honor the 78 Steelers, who, even though I have them as the third greatest team of all time, they really could be the greatest team of all time. But unlike all my other videos, I'm actually going to talk about their opponents, the 1978 Dallas Cowboys. Now, if I did the top 25 Super Bowl teams of all time, the Dallas Cowboys, the 1978 Dallas Cowboys would be on this list. And you're going to say, wait a minute, Dan, the 78 Cowboys lost the Super Bowl. That's correct. But I still think the 78 Dallas Cowboys is one of the greatest teams of all time, even though they didn't win a Super Bowl. I'm going to talk about them a little bit here. Offensive coordinator Dan Reeves. For those of you who don't know, he ended up going to 4 Super Bowls as a head coach with 2 separate teams. Yes, he went 0-4, but it's still impressive. He took not just one, but 2 different teams to Super Bowls. Has over 200 wins as a head coach. He's the offensive coordinator. Tom Landry, he's in the Pro Football Hall of Fame, one of the greatest head coaches of all time. And one thing about the Dallas Cowboys of the 70s is they were the winningest team in the 70s. That's what started the whole America's team, was all the great comeback wins that they had. No team won more football games in the 70s than the Dallas Cowboys. Yes, Steelers are a team in the 70s, but that's Super Bowl wins. Total overall wins actually goes to the Dallas Cowboys. The Dallas Cowboys, the 78 Cowboys, were loaded with talent on defense. They had 2 first-team All-Pro players, 5 Pro Bowlers, plus they had a guy by the name of Ed Too Tall Jones, who you had to account for. He was an above-average player, not Pro Bowl player this year. So you have Ed Too Tall Jones, who you have to account for, plus 5 other Pro Bowlers. This team had the third best defense in the league, only giving up 13.0 points a game. I mean, this defense was good on all 3 levels. They were fast, they were athletic, they had a ton of talent, but on offense is where they really made their bones. They were the highest scoring offense in the league. They have Hall of Famers, Roger Staubach. You had Hall of Fame running back and Tony Dorsett. History, because especially not to have Emmitt Smith. Tony Dorsett was amazing. I mean, Tony Dorsett was really, really good. Go back, look at some highlight reels. Difference between Tony Dorsett and Emmitt Smith. Tony Dorsett was a threat to score anywhere. He actually has a 99-yard touchdown. Just the guy had literally world-class speed. Of course, it's overused quite a bit, but he was arguably the fastest player on the field every single time he stepped on the field. Really underrated player, especially in nowadays where his yardage isn't as impressive as it was when he retired. They had a Pro Bowl wide receiver and tight end, Pro Bowl wide receiver Tony Hill. His son was a pretty good basketball player by the name of Grant Hill. Yes, it's that Tony Hill. And they had Billy Joe Dupree, who went to the Pro Bowl that year. Now, keep in mind, this team also had Drew Pearson, who was coming towards the end of his career. Didn't have a Pro Bowl season, but if you look at the history of Drew Pearson, the guy came up big in big plays. The very first Hail Mary play in the 75 playoff game against the Vikings, it's that Drew Pearson. So you have to fear this guy, even though he's no longer a Pro Bowl player. And also Jackie Smith, who's in the Hall of Fame, was also on this team. Unfortunately, Google Jackie Smith Super Bowl 13, and you will watch his one pass target. Yes, he drops it in the end zone. And here's a Hall of Fame tight end. And some backstory here. When the Cowboys won their first Super Bowl, they signed Mike Ditka, who was going to retire, and he ended up staying with the Cowboys, helping the Cowboys win their first Super Bowl. As a matter of fact, Roger Staubach said without Ditka, they wouldn't have won that Super Bowl. So they went ahead and used that same blueprint to try to beat the Steelers, because they played in Super Bowl 10 and lost 21-17. So this is the very first time these 2 teams rematch. Also, a little known fact here, in 78, this is the first season the NFL went from a 14 to a 16-game schedule. Now, the Steelers this year were 14-2 in the very first ever 16-game season. And their 2 losses were, one was a home loss to the Houston Oilers, which were their division rivals. Back then, the league, there was only 28 teams, so split up with, you had at West, you had a Central, and you had an East Division. And the AFC Central only had 4 teams, where the East and the West had 5. So they had to play the Oilers, the Browns, and the Bengals twice a year. And what happened was the Oilers beat them at home, but then lost the rematch on the road. Now, the Oilers were the only team to beat them at home, and they had this rookie running back by the name of Earl Campbell. Earl Campbell's first 3 years in the league are the best 3 years of any running back ever. Unfortunately, when you have a power running back like Earl Campbell, you can't be in the league for very long. He just ran with such a ferocity, such an intensity. He used to say, quote, it's kind of girly for one man to bring me down. And that's how he played. But if you look at some Earl Campbell highlights, you want to see some good stuff. But for the first 3 years in the league, he was arguably not only the best running back in the league, he was the best player in the league. So when the Steelers had the AFC Championship game of Houston coming to Pittsburgh, there was legitimate fear that the Steelers may not be able to win this game. But they ended up winning the game. They ended up winning 34-5. So you have to understand the other loss was to the Los Angeles Rams, who was in the NFC Championship game against the Dallas Cowboys. Dallas Cowboys beat them 28-0. So the two teams that Pittsburgh beat, one of them, they got revenge. The other one was beaten in the championship game by Dallas, who had the number one scoring offense, third best scoring defense. So, I mean, you're looking at a true clash of the Titans here. So, and here's the thing about this Super Bowl is this might be the best Super Bowl of all time. And I know people say, what about 28-3 and 2 years ago? The Falcons were not considered a great team. The 78 Cowboys were a great team. These two teams, when they played, were the two best teams in the NFL, head and shoulders. One won the AFC Championship game 34-5. The other one shut out the Rams 28-0. Now, I'm going to backtrack and talk a little bit about the history of the Steelers. Chuck Noll took over as head coach in 1969. He went 1-13. Now, as you know, they won Super Bowl 9 and 10, which was in 74 and 75. But in 74, they ended up drafting 4 Hall of Famers. They ended up drafting Lynn Swann, Jack Lambert, John Stallworth, and Mike Webster. See, I think the 78 team is the greatest Steeler team of all time because you have these 4 Hall of Famers completely integrated into the team. Most history experts will tell you that the 76 Steelers are the greatest defense of all time. Of course, they lost to the to the Oakland Raiders, if you watched my video a couple weeks ago. So this is the time that they still have the greatest defense, arguably ever. According to the NFL Network, the Steel Curtain is the greatest defense of all time. Now, you have to understand, in 78, they had the number one scoring defense. They gave up 12.2 points a game. In 79, where they also win the Super Bowl, it jumps up to 16.4. So as you can see, the defense is starting to erode. That's why the 78 Steelers are a much better team than 79 Steelers. Now, 79 Steelers have the highest scoring offense. This is only the fifth best scoring offense. But Rocky Bleier is not a starter on the 79 Steelers. He was a member. He is a starter on the 78 Steelers. And I'm going to get into this now. You have to understand, not only is this the greatest Super Bowl of all time, arguably, it has some great stories. Rocky Bleier, I read his autobiography. It's one of the greatest books you'll ever read in your life. Here's a guy, star football player, goes to Notre Dame. I'm going to say it right that time. Gets drafted by Pittsburgh Steelers, then gets drafted to go fight in Vietnam, wins a Purple Heart, and he doesn't go into too much detail regarding this, but he ends up getting shrapnel in his knee, ends up getting sent home, and what does he do? He wants to play football. Well, Pittsburgh Steelers back then, they didn't say, hey, can't play, we're going to cut you. They said, you want to coach? He's like, no, I really just want to be a player. You want to be a scout? Well, he tried it. He made every single player look like they were going to win the next Heisman Trophy. So he wasn't really cut out for that, so he kept on trying. And by the way, this is in the 70s, same time as Rocky, well, more or less. He did the same kind of workout Rocky did. If you ever watch that triage where it's like 20 degrees and he's got those gray sweats on, Rocky Bleier did that. All right? Rocky Bleier did that. He talks in his book about how he would drive to the track and he would hope for a red light or like something that would stop traffic so he wouldn't have to go. He talked about how much he dreaded going, but he overcame that. How much does that add to a football team? Well, let's say you're a little tired. You look over, you got Rocky Bleier. He's out there practicing. By the way, what happened is that doctors found more shrapnel in his knee after a couple surgeries because he was still having all this pain. They found some more shrapnel. You got to realize mid-'70s technology is a lot different than now. This is something he might have been made good as new immediately. But here you are. You got shrapnel in your knee. You come back and you blocking for Franco Harris. By the way, in the Super Bowl, he does catch a touchdown pass. Now, Pro Football Reference, which I'm using for a lot of my information, they messed this up. They have Rocky Bleier as the running back, Franco Harris as the fullback. Rocky Bleier blocked for Franco Harris. Rocky Bleier is 5'10", 205. Franco Harris is 6'2", 230. What are the cojones on Rocky Bleier? All right? You want to talk about the guts of... Anyway, I'm sorry. I went on a rant here, but I read the book. I love this book. I find it inspiring. You should find it inspiring. But here's a team, greatest defense of all time, one of the greatest stories in Rocky Bleier. Here's another story. Talk about Hollywood Henderson for the Dallas Cowboys. I'm real fast. He's famously went into a Super Bowl saying, Terry Bradshaw's so dumb he couldn't spell cat if you spotted in the C and the T. Now, Hollywood Henderson should be in a Pro Football Hall of Fame. Unfortunately, he developed an addiction to something called cocaine. So what the Dallas Cowboys did is that now in the early 80s, they decided to trade him to Miami. In case you didn't figure this out, if you have an addiction to cocaine, you are an NFL player in Miami, cocaine is pretty easy to find. So he ended up developing a big issue, got kicked out of the league, had all sorts of problems, overcame his drug addiction, ended up helping people out, ended up working with drug addiction counseling, did a lot of social work, did a lot of volunteer work, did a lot of great things for the community. Then he wins $25 million in the lottery. I am not making this up. Google it. It's too good to be true. I can't make this up. So the reason why there will never be a team as good as the 78 Steelers, okay? I'm going to tell you this right now. You have arguably the greatest defense of all time, plus you have 5 Hall of Famers on offense. You have Terry Bradshaw. You have Franco Harris, Lynn Swann, John Stallworth, Mike Webster. A lot of people think Mike Webster is the greatest center of all time. You will never have a team as good as 78 Steelers. Not only do you have 10 Hall of Famers, plus Hall of Fame head coach, you got a guy who has a Purple Heart because he had shrapnel in his knee from Vietnam. Then they beat the winningest team of the decade and possibly the greatest Super Bowl team of all time. No, there will never be a team as good as 78 Steelers ever again. Now, for the $1 million question, would they beat the 94 49ers? Well, I got 4 reasons why they would. Number one, in playing the Dallas Cowboys, that team is very similar to the 94 Niners, a running mobile quarterback. Well, that's either Steve Young or Roger Staubach, okay? You have a team that's very similar. The Dallas Cowboys had a very good D, but they were the number 1 scoring offense. That's exactly what the 94 49ers are like, so they already beat them. And unlike the Niners, who beat a good but not even close to being great. Let's face it, the 94 Chargers had a good football team. The Dallas Cowboys were a great team. So I'm looking at, I know they beat a great Dallas team to get to the Super Bowl, but the Steelers beat a great team in the Super Bowl. So I give that as an additional advantage. It's like my 1A. 2, better head coach. I got Chuck Noll. He's the only coach that's 4-0 in Super Bowls. George Seifert, he's won 2. Is he in the Hall of Fame? No. So I love me some George Seifert. Is he as good as Chuck Noll? Chuck Noll, nobody will ever mention Chuck Noll being the greatest coach of all time. Well, he started off taking a 1-13 team, made them in a 4-time Super Bowl winner. What's really impressive about Chuck Noll is that even after his dynasty started to fall apart, he still did some really good coaching jobs with the Steelers, even though he didn't win a Super Bowl after Super Bowl 14 in 79. Nobody will ever call him the greatest coach of all time, but he really should get more recognition. Very underrated coach. Third reason why they would beat the 94 49ers is more Hall of Famers. You have Steve Young, you have Jerry Rice, Deion Sanders, Ricky Jackson. I'll argue that Tim McDonald and Ricky Waters deserves to be in Hall of Fame. That still puts you at 6. You have 10, plus the head coach. That's 11. More Hall of Famers. Number 4 is that the Steel Curtain. Almost every NFL expert will tell you it's the greatest defense of all time. Yes, the 94 49ers have one of the greatest offenses of all time. It's one of the greatest. But the Steel Curtain's arguably the greatest defense of all time. Now, for 1 year, I'll tell you the 85 Bears were better. But if you want to talk greatest defenses of all time, I mean, I'm hard-pressed to say, you got 5 Hall of Famers on that defense, and they did things that nobody ever thought of before. I mean, the Steel Curtain, the idea that you bring glamour to defense, it's not something that's really done. And they did it for a long period of time. And the 85 Bears, of course, they had, now you can make an argument, the 86 Bears also. But so greatest defense of all time versus one of the greatest offenses of all time. I already gave you 3 different reasons, plus a head coach. So that's my logic. I'm going to tell you this right now, and yes, I'm spoiling it because there will never be a team as good as the 78 Steelers ever again. But I still have them as number 3 on my list. So if you haven't already, there's this awesome red button right here. Look down here. Look. Bam! Hit that button. Become one of the greatest people on planet Earth. Wait till next week when I have the second greatest Super Bowl team of all time.